Start with roll call.
Right. Online, we have Ann Hughes, Cheryl Hartman, Christina Duar, Alicia Peltz, Katie Fairbanks, MCAT, Melissa Fisher, Shane Stack. In the room, we have Commissioner Vero, Slotnick, Strohmeyer, Allison France, Brenda Davis, Carrie Powers, Griffin Smith, Vinnie Pavlish, Maddie Scott, and Chris Lonsberg.
Thanks, everyone. Is there any public comment on items not on the agenda? And we got a couple items with the consent agenda. Anything needs to be pulled out or discussed separately?
Good to me. I move we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, action items. We have no action items. Correspondence. Discussion. Legislative update.
Yeah, legislative update.
There we go.
Morning, commissioners. So just a couple of bills to go over quickly today. Start with a broad topic and then we'll move into the specific bills. So this week appears like it's going to be property taxes and Medicaid expansion as kind of the main topics of the week. So for Medicaid expansion, as you all, I'm sure will recall, we put together a letter that is signed by our Board of County Commissioners, the Gallatin County Board of County Commissioners, the Chief Executive for Butte Silverbow, the Chief Executive for the City of Missoula. So that is kind of off of what we are basing Missoula County's position, which is the continued Medicaid expansion in order to make sure that things like federally funded or federally qualified health centers and rural hospitals have access to funding that's necessary to be viable and sustainable in the state of Montana. So this week we will have at least two of the Medicaid bills, one which provides basically a sunset for Medicaid, and what it does is basically say that there'll be no new enrollees under expansion, and then when the last person who is currently on it falls off, then Medicaid expansion would end. So it's kind of be this long kind of phase out of Medicaid expansion.
Attrition.
Basically, it would go away through attrition. And then the second bill we have this week, it sounds like will be one of the two bills potentially to extend Medicaid. And so we are using that letter as kind of our primary message on those, which basically instead of lobbying on a specific bill, one over the other, we're basically just using that letter and then sending that to either our committee members if we have them on that, or to the entirety of the committee if we don't have somebody on the committee that will hear those two bills this week. So that's kind of where we are on Medicaid for this week. And then we have just a bunch of property tax bills. I was trying to find a good word there that would not get me in trouble. Bunch of property tax bills this week coming up. And so it sounds like we will have kind of two competing bills around the homestead and ComSted exemption heard this week. So one of those is primary sponsor is Representative Mark Thane from our delegation, and then their Republican side is being sponsored by that's who the requester is, but not who's actually carrying the bill. That's not helpful. It says that it's Steve Fitzpatrick, but then it has a picture of
Lou Jones.
as I say, it has Lou Jones as the as the picture. And those two things don't go together.
Riding on
So,
coattails.
yeah, so both bills provide for the concept of a homestead exemption in different ways. So the Democrats is a phased homestead exemption that starts at roughly $50,000 of value. Everybody gets that credit, and then as the value of the home goes up, you may or may not qualify for more.
The tax rate changes as you go up the scale of
And then the tax rate also changes as you go up the value up
So-
to $2 million, which would go up.
So there's a chunk of money nobody pays taxes on then. And then after that, the sort of tranches of value are defined by tax rate.
Correct. And so you can kind of think of it very similar to the way federal income tax works.
Yeah.
Right, which is a progressive system where in essence for the first amount of money that you pay, and then for the next dollar you pay a certain percent. And then when you hit a certain threshold, it's starting in those dollars, you go higher. So that's kind of the mechanism that's proposed in the Democratic package. In the Republican package, it is a combination of adjusting the tax rates, although that is a separate bill, and a straight homestead and commercial exemption.
Like
So
the first
would
chunk of
exempt.
value, nobody pays.
Correct. And I believe right now the proposal is I think it's $250,000. It could be $200,000, but I believe it's 250 right now is the proposal in the Republican.
So what below 250? You don't pay any property
So
tax?
your assessed value would be reduced by $250,000.
Oh, I
If your home is currently $500,000, your home value that you paid taxes on would drop to $250,000. And that would just be flat across the board. So if your home were not valued at $250,000, you'd obviously go to zero. Then everybody over 250 would.
And the rate that they're proposing is,
Their rate, yes, their rates are different. So the Democrats, again, is a progressive scale up to higher than the existing rate for homes over $2 million in value. This one would lower the rate from 1.35 to 1.1. So it's a smaller reduction in what you'd pay, but you would not pay on the first 250. So
And
a
it's
larger amount is
1.1.
exempt,
across the.
but then it's
No matter-
1.1 until
no matter
you
how much.
until you get to 2 million, and then it goes up.
Okay.
So, and then there's a different rate. I apologize. I don't remember what the rate is over 2 million off the top of my head. So those will be there. We, right now, our plan on these bills and the others that are up this week around property taxes, because we don't know what the vehicle will be that will actually move through the legislature, we will send some very specific comments about the actual proposal, but we're going to do for all of them a message that is very similar in the beginning that basically talks about the fact that property tax relief is needed and that we are relying on the legislature to get something basically done in this 2025 legislative session that points out that the levers that local government controls really are actually the smallest levers in what we can do. Again, in Missoula County, it's roughly 25% of your tax bill that is the county portion of your tax, not the other taxing jurisdictions for which we all
Commissioner's
collect,
discretion.
are up to the commissioner's discretion. So things you could actually control. So it's really actually the smallest portion of our budget that actually are levers that you control versus voter approved or other mandatory things that we have to do. And so that's kind of the general message that will go on all of them. And then we're doing a small message for each of them, basically the things that we like about each of them. But the idea here is that something has to happen.
Do you know if
through this legislative session.
if representatives from the other classes of property have mobilized to speak against either of these bills?
I have not heard anything related to who proponents and opponents will be. I think part of the challenge right now is that there are so many ideas that nobody's really sure what the vehicle is, and people are caught, as we are a little bit, in a catch-22 of, do we say something now knowing this might not actually be the vehicle and really start championing something when something else might be that we want to make
I
changes
like
to.
the general comments. What I would love to add to general comments, that it would be wonderful for any of these bills to take into account the actual economic diversity that exists across counties in the state of Montana. And that a $2 million house in Gallatin County is different than a $2 million house in Golden Valley County. And I would personally, rather than see straight dollar markers, have something in there around the percentage of the percentage of your house as it compares to median home value in that county. And given that the state, because they do all the assessment, has all this data and it's all agreed upon across the state, I feel like I'd rather see something like that rather than, well, $700,000 is this and $600,000 is that, because those numbers mean very different things in different counties.
Right now, is there any accounting for differences between counties? And in which case, I guess I wonder, would, even if,
There's not.
so if we're to have an across the board approach, would any of these be a better across the board approach than what we're saddled with right now? And I don't even know legally if we can we do that?
I mean,
Can there be-
things have to be equal. I'm looking at Vinny, but it'd be like if the rule was such, the law was such that for every 20% of value over 100% of median home value in your county, the tax rate increases by X. It's the same all across the state. It's just acknowledging that median home value in Golden Valley County is different than in Gallatin County. And I feel like to not acknowledge that is kind of goofy. We're attempting to simplify something that is inherently complex, and I don't think we can meet complexity with simplicity and expect success.
I think the answer to your question is that
it's the idea that Josh has is a legislative prerogative, not a county prerogative. We don't have the discretion to do the thing that.
For sure,
Josh is
for
not.
sure.
Sure, but I guess
totally get that.
what I'm wondering, do you run afoul constitutionally or otherwise with having, having the tax rate somehow linked to different, median home prices in each county?
And that's an interesting question. Beyond equalization components, you could probably raise an equal protection challenge or something like that. If you could define classes where you feel that you are equally positioned. And their idea about equal position would be different than Josh's idea about equal position. And so I could see a challenge. I don't know what would happen with that. But it's hard to analyze constitutionality from an equal protection standpoint without looking at the specific language. So if there was like a bill doing what Josh is suggesting, it'd be easier for me to say, I think you're creating categories of people that are similarly situated enough that it will result in a challenge.
Are there any bills that do what you're suggesting?
I haven't heard of it, but if we were writing a general letter, what I would like, just speaking as one, is a sentence in there saying we would also want the legislature to take into account the great economic diversity between counties in our state and be aware that a one-size-fits-all solution may not fit everybody.
Yeah,
Just
we can
to keep that in mind.
Yeah, we can certainly, I think we can figure out a way to add that into the general comment.
I mean, that's without asking for specifics, like I was just.
And
And let them figure out the solution to it.
For sure,
Yeah.
as that is their job. to do.
It's like at a abstracted level, it's just the government has to treat similarly situated people in a similar way. And so what that means in terms of how you integrate the economic component of that in, or like how you design that, it's a kind of a complicated question.
Sure.
Be glad not to receive that draft request as a legislative attorney, I guess.
I get that it's complicated.
Yeah.
It should be complicated. As I was saying, the whole thing is complicated because our state is not an economic monolith.
Yeah.
And if we treat it as such, somewhere, it's going to be treated poorly.
So the last tax bill I want to talk about is SB 115. So SB 115 is a bill that we saw last legislative session. It was SB 511 last session. If you remember that number, that was the idea that
The interesting numbers.
Yeah, this would be Daniel Zolnikoff out of the Billings area. This is, the idea that we would cap all revenue growth at 4%. And so you would basically use half the average rate of inflation plus newly taxable up to 4%. And then anything beyond 4% would not be available to local governments. That bill will be up for hearing either tomorrow morning at 8 or 9. It's got 2 hearing times listed currently, both 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock. So one of those 2 times right now, it will be heard tomorrow. Potentially, I will be testifying as an opponent. Tomorrow, we're still kind of trying to coordinate some pieces there. The challenge with that bill, as you all are aware, is the fact that in reality, what it incentivizes is actually the wrong thing. So the way it works right now is you get half the average rate of inflation, and then you have newly taxable. Newly taxable is what actually creates additional taxing capacity for a local jurisdiction. And Missoula County and most counties attempt to be fairly conservative. I won't speak for cities, which I also think are trying to be conservative, but basically that allows us to do what we refer to as banking mills, right? So that we don't use all of our mill availability in any one year, because we recognize that we need to have different needs in different years depending on what we're doing, but also that the economy kind of moves in that way and we don't know when we'll need those resources. By forcing everything into that cap of 4% and taking newly taxable away from this ability to create mills in the future, but putting it into this, what you're actually incentivizing is everybody to levy the maximum amount in every year to make sure they're at least getting that 4% and then banking that cash going forward, because otherwise you lose it, because if you don't levy it in that year, it doesn't move forward into future years where you could use it when you might have additional needs. And so you, in essence, have to levy the maximum or risk potentially losing that. And so in the case of Missoula County, A good comparison, because it's used by the legislature quite often, is Flathead County. The reality is when you look at Missoula County's budget and Flathead County's budget this year, we grew for fiscal year 25 by the same dollar amount. And we reserved roughly the same mill capacity, the ability to levy additional mills into the future. And that would in essence go away. We would levy the same amount, but if you were to levy less, like I said, you would lose that future capacity. Again, for that unpredictable. And that is kind of what got us through the pandemic, right? Was the fact that we had some additional mill capacity, values grew, those kinds of things. And we've been able to preserve some of that capacity into the future and still deal with the fact that we had real challenges during that trying to buy goods and services. And half the average 3-year rate of inflation does not allow you to buy those goods and services in a full inflationary period.
So we wouldn't be able to levy the maximum amount of banked mills. We could levy just the amount of mills that would get us to 4%.
You in essence really would get rid of banked mills because to get to that 4%, you're using
Once you
newly
get-
taxable and then everything else is gone.
And please correct me if I get this wrong, but this feels like it puts us in a situation, if we have a year of high growth, where we are on the hook for providing services for folks who are not adequately paying for those services.
Yes, I mean, that is the reality is that, there are years where it costs more than 4% in order to provide those services and years when it costs less. And this basically sets it up. So
So here's the amount of money that we're asking from a county as an entirety to provide services. It's like one sort of pie. And then over here, got money coming in from newly taxable property that gets added to that. That money ostensibly is used to provide services to these new homes, even though it gets mixed in with everything else. So if it's cut off at 4%, that responsibility for providing services to the new homes continues, but the revenue doesn't, which means the services that we provide to everybody get spread ever farther, more thinly to reach out to. So everybody suffers because of this in terms of
In
the
the long
quality of their
yeah.
roads or public safety or justice system or elections or whatever it is.
yes.
So you're going to testify against this.
Potentially, I will be testifying. I'm working with Jen on what the best way to message for this is. So
You were the right person to,
sure, I'm happy to do that. But that's kind of what we have, at least at the beginning of the week. We'll give you more on Thursday once some of the hearings have happened, but that's kind of what the week is looking like so far.
Can we all just admire Chris's
Griffin, does that
amazing
make-
manicure?
Any sense?
Yeah, I do have good nails going on today.
Can tickets home for.
I do have some good nails going on.
If you want.
My daughter was very
So-
worried that she would get nail polish right on her
It'll be really
nails because she was doing hers for the first time and she asked if she could do
You
mine.
wouldn't, but.
And I, of course, said yes.
Questions after the hearing.
I'm very
I was
happy.
gonna say, I of course said yes. I was gonna say, and then she was like, people will laugh at you. And I was like, I don't think they will.
No, I think it's
that
great.
people really enjoy my nails.
so one
I
bit
love
of,
it.
one tidbit of news, I can't believe I forgot this. So we are at the epicenter of the nation and that is in so many ways. So yesterday, the Federal Railroad Administration, yesterday morning, transmitted the final Amtrak Daily Long Distance Service Study to Congress. And the route through Missoula is a preferred route recommended for
job.
restoration.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
That's
that's a
amazing.
multi-year process to
It's a
get that.
preferred route.
It's a
What does
preferred
that
route.
mean?
That means we are one of 15 routes in the nation that are recommended to be restored. A lot to be figured out to
That's great.
make that recommendation a reality, but that's
Awesome.
Exciting.
it's a big deal.
Yeah.
So,
How many are out west? Of the 15? Oh, okay.
I bet very few
Yeah.
by comparison.
No, that's awesome.
That's great.
What do we expect now?
hard to say, less than 24 hours into the new administration, but it's it's in the lap of Congress to move forward with the recommendations.
Do you still feel like it's pretty feasible in the new administration?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. We're making America great again and rebuilding our infrastructure in this nation, then should be right up their alley. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, anything else? Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.